We now understand that the land where our original church was built and the land where our church now sits was probably taken from indigenous people who have endured over a century of oppression. We are working to understand how our contemporary community can address this injustice. A long time ago, in the early 1880s, several families had been meeting in homes and in the local church for worship. In 1896, a group of these people came together to incorporate a new church, the Redmond Methodist Episcopal Church. 8 people signed the Articles of Incorporation. There was very little known about these 8 people except that they all lived in the Redmond vicinity. There is no minister listed. B.F. Luce is listed as the very first pastor in 1896. In 1907, G.W. Carr came to serve the Redmond and the Kirkland Methodist Episcopal churches. He is described only as an elderly white-haired man. In fact, the Pacific Northwest Conference records do not mention Redmond until 1908, when it stated that Redmond was a field full of promise. The first church building was built in 1908 near the corner of Redmond Way and 164th. There were now 13 members. Here's a picture of Phineas and Hattie Thayer and their family, maybe the church's first pictorial directory. We know that Phineas came from Pennsylvania and was a farmer and a lumberman. There was no regular minister until about 1925. Before that, the church was served by numerous supply pastors who came to Redmond on Sunday mornings to preach. They were given a small payment, lunch, or both. But it was the Ladies' Aid Society who were very busy church ladies. They were raising money to support the church, going to prayer meetings, visiting the sick and the strangers, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, caring for the poor. The district superintendent wrote in his report in 1915, "God bless them." The ladies cleaned the church, paid the utilities, bought supplies. Eventually, they furnished the kitchen with tableware, but they made it clear that it belonged to them and not the church. The congregation was growing and becoming more active and enthusiastic, and they needed more room for all the things they were doing. They also needed more land. So in 1926, the church took advantage of a site, the place where we now worship, that the Perigo family had set aside for a church in 1900. This is Warren Perigo. They moved the building over from Redmond Way to the corner where it is now. So looking at this picture, this building became the social hall, what we now call the Swan Room, added the sanctuary, now the chapel, right next to the Swan Room, added a second story above the social hall, bricked the exterior, and this is what we all call the old building. It was dedicated in 1928, mostly paid for because of a community dinner that took in almost $10,000 in pledges. The final cost of the new building, the remodeling, and everything they did was $18,000. Records show that it took a really long time to pay this off. So since this time, the church has had 40 pastors appointed. We've also sponsored, since I've been here in 1984, 6 people who have gone on to become pastors, and there are probably many more before that. We have been called the Redmond Methodist Episcopal Church, the Redmond Community Church, the Redmond Methodist Church, and finally the Redmond United Methodist Church. But we've also been called the Heart of Redmond. From a very early time, this place has been known for social service in the community. When the schools were overflowing, we offered space for the children to meet. When community groups needed a space to meet, they came here, and they still do. We have celebrated meals, births and baptisms, confirmations, graduations, weddings, marriages that lasted over 50 years, the loss of loved ones, and many other events. Diaper Day, Blessing of the Animals, Vacation Bible School, the many different seasons of our church year. So here we are in 2021, a whole year into a global pandemic and online worship. And we have truly discovered that even though we love our church building, it really is the people who make the church. It's been that way since 1880, when people started gathering to worship in Redmond in homes and schools, and it still is true today. So in the coming months, we're going to learn more about how we are grounded in our past and growing into our future as we celebrate our 125 years in the heart of Redmond.